okay at this point. I know we're kind of, that's a work in progress, but in the long term, we do want to see that you're able to maintain that a bit better. What's going on, guys? Tyler Yasuda here with Titanium Fitness. I know it's been a long time. I don't really know how long, but I figured what better time to get back into YouTube than right now when we're all kind of stuck at home. I'm sure a lot of you guys are spending a lot of time online, so I figured maybe this would be a good time to make a video. So a lot of people working from home, and a lot of the people that I coach, a lot of my friends and family even, are telling me that they're having a really hard time being productive and getting things done at home. And I'm thinking to myself that, well, I've done this now for at least 6 years, depending on when you start counting. I've worked from home for 6+ years, and I consider myself a bit of a seasoned pro when it comes to being productive at home. And it wasn't always that way. Like when I first started, definitely was not as productive as I could have been, and I made a lot of mistakes. So I'm hoping that by sharing some tips with you guys can then avoid having to go through the whole process of trial and error that I did, and you can get to being productive a lot faster than I did as well. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is separation of space. Think about it this way: when you are normally working, you very likely, you go to your workplace, right? You literally go to a place to do work, and then you come home at the end of the day and you rest, relax, eat, do whatever. So kind of by default, after however many years of doing your job, your brain and your body are going to think that now that you are spending all your time at home, it's time to rest and relax. And that makes sense. So the first thing that I want you to do is create a workspace. If you have enough space to do this, you can set up an office room. You can, at the very least, maybe you have a desk that you can set up as your workspace, or if you have a really small apartment, let's say, or you have roommates and stuff, you just don't have the space you would need to create a full-on workspace, you can at least designate a seat at your dining table or your kitchen counter or whatever, and always use that seat for work. Most important piece here is making sure that whatever workspace you set up, you always keep it just for work. So if you have your desk and you know that that's designated just for your workspace, and you are doing your work, you're grinding, and then, I don't know, however much time passes, you decide to take a break to check Facebook or check Instagram or hop on YouTube. Whatever the case might be, if you're gonna do that, don't do it at your desk. Go do it somewhere else that's not your workspace. As soon as you start kind of mixing it together, it stops being an effective workspace. So, kind of segueing into the next thing, it's probably a good idea to have spaces designated for you to work, maybe even for you to eat, maybe for you to sleep, to play games, etc. Like for me, like when it's time to eat, I'm always eating at my dining table. I try not to eat upstairs as much as I can. When it's time to sleep, I always sleep in my bed. I rarely nap, so it's really just at night I'll hop in bed and I know it's time to sleep. The idea here though is that you will have a variety of visual and physical cues to your brain and your body to tell you like that it is time to work or that it's time to rest or whatever the case might be, right? It just helps you have a way to kind of switch modes between work and anything else. Next piece here is physical activity. So I want to make sure that you guys are setting aside some time for physical activity every single day. It doesn't have to be every day, but it really, like, I strongly encourage that you consider making it every day. Maybe take one day off here and there. When you do train, when you work out, your body releases endorphins, which interact with receptors in your brain, and they make you feel good. And the thing is, if you were to stop training completely, as some people probably have in the past few weeks, you lack that biochemical reaction and you start to feel a bit down. Most of you watching this probably are trying to find ways to do resistance training of some sort, and most of you guys are pretty serious athletes, so I'm sure that you're putting some time and effort into that. But you've got to be creative. You've got to make sure you dedicate yourself a little bit to finding that time and space to work out, even with limited equipment. But I do promise you, if you are willing to be creative, if you are able to stay focused and really push yourself, even with the whole quarantine situation, I promise you can still be productive. It's really just a matter of making sure that you're putting in that effort consistently enough. Your workouts will obviously be different, and like I said, I have that template up if you want to use that. There's also hundreds of coaches who are putting out stuff like this, which I thought was really cool. So you have all the options in the world right now to seek out that advice. On your off days, or if you're going to take a day off from resistance training, I'd still encourage that you get some activity in. If where you're located, if you're still allowed to go outside for exercise, maybe go for a run, go for a walk your dog, whatever the case might be. And if you're not allowed to go outside, or if you just don't want to risk exposure, that's fine too. I would still recommend that you do some sort of cardio type exercise if you're not doing resistance. So maybe jump rope, shadow box, burpees, etc. Anything that you can do in a pretty small space, or make the most of the space that you have. As a side note, I'd also encourage that you, if you're not getting outside, like literally outside, I'd encourage you to roll up your blinds during the day, get some sunlight, because if you don't get some sunlight, you will gradually turn into a vampire. Here's a big one: nutrition and hydration. Don't forget to eat and drink. As silly as it sounds, I know a lot of us, myself included, will forget to do this if our routine is disrupted. So if your daily routine that you're used to gets broken up, you might not do it as consistently. If and when you're allowed to leave, I would encourage you to make a list first. So plan ahead, make sure you know what you need to get before you go, so you're not there at the store kind of scrambling and buying everything. Prioritize healthy foods that have a long shelf life, so your carb sources, especially things like pastas, grains, beans, rice, things that are going to last for a while in your pantry are great options. For the things that you can't get fresh, since you're not going to be going to the store a whole lot, like your meats, your vegetables, your fruits, most of your produce, right? For those things, you should buy it in fairly large quantities when you go. When you come home from the store, trim it, cut it up, and put it in the freezer so you have it ready to go later on. All of the packaged and preserved foods that you normally buy, you can probably buy that normally as well. But just a side note there, you should consider that if you're going to be at home all the time and you're going to be around all the food that you have or that you've just recently bought, it is a bit tempting if you get bored, especially if you're like bored of eating. It's tempting to go reach for kind of an unhealthy or calorie-dense snack. And depending on where you're at with your diet and your fitness and your activity, that may not be the best choice. So just be mindful of that when you are shopping around for food. I would encourage that you prioritize the healthier choices so that at least available, you at least have the opportunity to make good choices throughout the day. So how do we tie all this together? I would say that you develop a consistent, repeatable daily structure, which in my opinion starts with your sleep. So the night before, that's really important. Make sure that you get to bed early enough to allow 7 to 9 hours. I know that a lot of people probably get away with less than 7 to 9 hours, but I say allow for that amount of time because most of you won't hit the bed and immediately knock out. Most of us will take a little bit of time to actually fall asleep. So you allow 7 to 9, assuming you're gonna get less than that. Something that really helps me and might help you as well is setting a bedtime alarm. So setting an alarm to kind of give you a mental cue that it's time to get ready for bed helps a lot, maybe an hour before you intend to actually go to sleep, to remind yourself that you actually have to do that. Otherwise, if you don't have to wake up at a certain time the next morning, you might find yourself staying up until 2, 3, 4 a.m. Try to figure out what a reasonable time for you to wake up is, depending on how your work is. Maybe they expect you to be working at a certain time. That's not really determined for you, but if you have the freedom to choose, you should still choose a consistent time. The main thing here is that would allow you the same amount of time to sleep every night, and it would also allow you the same amount of time during the day. From here, what we're going to try to do is develop, I'm going to call them pieces. I don't have a better name for it. But the first pieces are going to be your morning and night routine. It's going to be the same sequence of events that either get your mind ready to wind down at the end of the night or get you going in the morning. And these will be our anchors. These are the things that there's not really any reason for them to change. They're always going to be roughly the same. Like, just for example, my morning routine for the past few months has been this. I'll wake up, I will brush my teeth, wash my face, and get dressed. I will grab my coffee if I'm having coffee that day. I will read over my whole structure for the day. I'll read some news for a little bit. I'll meditate, and that's going to be that. That, believe it or not, takes me about an hour. I do take my time with that. The whole idea is that I have the same sequence of events in the same order and with the same amount of time every single morning to get me going. So the next piece or pieces that you're going to have to figure out is for your work, obviously. That's the big part of this, right? Figure out what you're expected to do, whether that's up to you or up to your employer. Figure out what you have to do in a day. Try to figure out roughly how long each task will take. And when you're doing those estimations, try to be generous at first. Most people are not good at estimating, for one thing, anything that could possibly go wrong during whatever task might be. Also, we don't anticipate how long it's going to take us to transition from one task to the next. So be generous with those time allowances at first. Once you figure out your list of tasks and about how long each one's going to take, try to break that down into multiple blocks. Most of us realistically are not going to be able to work continuously for 8 hours or even 3 hours for that matter. So break it down into blocks of maybe 1, 2, 3 hours if you're really good at this, and figure out how many of those you might need throughout the day. The next piece is going to be, or pieces are going to be, your meals and your activity. So again, like we talked about before, make sure you block out some time to eat however many meals you do, and block out some time for some physical activity during the day. Now, the final piece here is going to be rest and relaxation. So whatever time you have left, after you go through all of that stuff, you've got your morning and night routine anchor pieces set up, you've got your work block set up, you've got your meals and activity kind of blocked out as well. Whatever time you have left can and should be used for rest and relaxation. Really important thing here though is that is leftover time. You are not borrowing that time or taking that time away from your work. You're not taking that time away from your morning and night routine. You're not taking it away from eating or getting activity. All those pieces are already sorted out. Whatever's left over can be to rest and relax. And realistically, depending on how hard your job is, depending on how demanding it is, that might not be a whole lot every day, but at the very least, a few days a week, you're gonna have some extra time to hang out. Obviously, there's like a million different ways you could set this up, that you could do this. And the way that I'm recommending that you do this is not necessarily the end all be all, just a place for you to kind of start guidelines that have worked really well for me in the past few years at least. So maybe use this as a starting point and refine as needed. How do you actually use this in your daily life? A really great starting place is Google Calendars or iCalendars. Most of you guys are gonna have your phone with you all the time or your computer in front of your face a good chunk of the day. So Google Calendars and iCal, they're really easy to use. The really nice thing about that is that you're always gonna have it there, and also it's really easy to rearrange stuff. So like if you have all these things blocked out and you're finding yourself having to switch things up or change things throughout the day, you can go ahead and just move those pieces around on your phone or your computer. If you have an Android phone, I know you can't do this on iPhones, which is a bummer, but if you have an Android phone, you could also set up a widget where your entire home screen just becomes your calendar. So the first thing that you see when you open up your phone every single time is gonna be your daily schedule. Another way you can approach this is with a planner, which is kind of my system for right now. This is what I've been doing for the past, I don't even know how long. But I prefer this myself. I think that writing can be a little bit more powerful than typing things out on your computer or your phone. And carrying a physical reminder essentially is a great way to never lose track of your structure. Now the last and probably the least organized way to approach this would be just a simple list, right? You can do this, there are apps to do this with on your phone. You can do this on a piece of paper, like a blank sheet of paper as well, but just list out each of those blocks. So morning routine, maybe work comes next, maybe breakfast comes next, and it's all down the list until you finish your day. You can do it that way. Again, like I said, this is probably the least organized way to do it, but it's also the simplest, so probably the easiest to get into. If this whole thing sounds ridiculous to you and you're not even sure if you want to try it, maybe this is where you start, is just with a paper list, and you see if you like that and you build from there. So I want to point out that most of these things have very little to do with the work itself. Most of it is really just managing yourself and managing your time better outside of work, so that when it is time to actually work, it allows you like the headspace and the actual space that you need to get shit done. And then, as long as you can do that, as long as you can be productive when you're supposed to work, then you have the time you need to be active, to eat properly, and hopefully have some time to relax. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you did, let me know. If you would like to see me dive deeper into any of these pieces here or go further in depth about anything in general, let me know. If you have video ideas, let me know. The last thing I want to say in this video is a huge thank you, and to kind of send my heart out to all the nurses out there. I know that right now, and like generally speaking, when you guys became nurses, you probably didn't sign up for this. You could never have guessed there was going to be a pandemic that put you in a position where you go off to work kind of worried or scared that you're going to be exposed to, what is a pretty dangerous situation, a pretty dangerous virus. And I know that for a lot of medical professionals, you don't really have a choice. You're still obligated to go into work for the most part. But at the end of the day, you're still doing your job. If you guys out there, if you know a nurse, you know a medical professional, I can't really tell you to do anything, but all I was going to say is if you can, give them a little bit of extra love, because their job is even harder than usual for the time being, and it will be for the indefinite future. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, guys. I will see you in the next video, hopefully sooner rather than later. Take care. Peace.